good morning. Sorry we missed last month. I've just been somewhat under the water with work. I'm working on a book for you guys to sort of outline my ideas of how to manage your orthopedic or musculoskeletal issues naturally. Anyway, today we're going to talk on part of that topic, sugar, a lot about the biochemistry of sugar, what it is, how we use it, why do we use it, and then, of course, how does it affect your joints? It's not the sugar, I guess, so much as excess sugar that is really the problem when it comes to musculoskeletal problems and joint issues. And remember, sugar is a mix of glucose and fructose. So while we all think glucose is mandatory, which it is, doesn't necessarily mean sugar is, okay? But we'll get into all of that. So let's get started. I'm Dr. Meredith Warner. I'm an orthopedic surgeon in Baton Rouge, and I'm very much interested in treating musculoskeletal health problems in a natural way, ideally preventing them, but if not preventing them, at least helping the body figure out how to reverse the problems. And that is possible, believe it or not. Just like you can reverse hypertension and diabetes and many other chronic diseases, it is possible to reverse the scourge of arthritis, tendonitis, stiffness, all the things that we assume to be inevitable with aging, which personally, I don't practice ageism. I don't believe that at all. So let's talk about one of the problems in our modern society, which is sugar. So questions people ask me, why do we even use glucose? Do we need it to survive? How is it metabolized? What is it really actually? And then how does sugar affect my pain? How does inflammation do it? What about my joints? And then once people realize how detrimental excessive amounts of sugar really is, or hyperglycemia, then they want to know, how can I avoid it and what can I do to make things better? So glucose. So why do we even need glucose? Glucose is sort of, I don't want to say the fundamental fuel, but it's pretty important. It is broken down to form the currency of energy that we use. So it is used by the body, in the mitochondria specifically, in a series of chemical reactions to form ATP. ATP is your fundamental currency of energy. You don't do anything. You can't talk, move, speak, breathe, anything without ATP, okay? And this comes from the electron transport chain primarily, or oxidative phosphorylation. That's when we breathe in, we use the oxygen to use the electron transport chain with respiratory, synthesis of ATP, because there are anaerobic ways to do it, meaning anaerobic, not breathing, versus aerobic ways to make ATP. And this use of ATP is conserved across all species throughout evolution. So this is a fundamental feature of life on Earth, is ATP. ATP is the currency of energy and how we convert fuel to energy. And that is done through ATPase. And then glucose is necessary for most of your metabolism and mine, and 20% of your resting metabolism goes to the brain. So at all times, your body is very much interested in keeping a steady state of glucose, primarily so the brain can continue to function no matter what. Okay, and then how do we evolve for glucose? So again, remember I said it's conserved across evolution and species. So a common feature of multiple organisms, a piece of plankton 30 billion years ago versus the dinosaurs versus us, is the function of ATPase, which is the enzyme in the mitochondria that actually converts the electrons into energy, into ATP for us. The redox pumps, or hydrogen pumps, okay, photosystems, which has to do with plants and sun, and then the electron transport chains. All of these are conserved and sort of how we recycle electrons over and over again and move energy around systems. Bacteria millions of years ago, we think, may have fermented some matter to obtain energy. So fermentation is the same process that yeast is used to make beer, things like that. Kombucha, kimchi, all of that is fermentation. Dashi, all of the sort of soy paste. So bacteria millions of years ago, we think, converted and made ATP this way prior to the atmosphere becoming rich with oxygen. During that time, hydrogen pumps were developed at the cellular level to move hydrogen from one area to another because during this fermentation process, excessive amounts of hydrogen were made as byproducts, and all that means is the environment got more and more acidic. So to keep the acid from denaturing proteins and basically blowing up the cell, you have to have a way to control the excessive acid from your energy production. And so hydrogen pumps evolved, we think. Over time, ATPase developed, which took advantage of this excessive amount of hydrogen, okay, that was pushed from one area to another. And so now what happens is you push the hydrogen from one area to another, and then you allow it to funnel through ATPase, and then that proton gradient, high-low, where it drops, that is harnessed for energy now. So that's sort of a very, very simplified way to think about how this all happened and how it's across species. So think of ATP, this is how I think of ATPase. It's like a hydroelectric dam, okay? So on one side, you've got the high reservoir filled with water. Think of that as the side of the cell or the side of the mitochondria membrane that's filled with hydrogen atoms, okay, that have been pumped there with active pumps. So your body put a ton of hydrogen on one side, just like engineers put a dam and build a ton of water. Well, what is that water and what is that group of protons or hydrogen? It's really just stored energy. Just wait, it's potential energy waiting to be used. So what happens? The engineer will open a little gate or a sluice, allow some of the water to flow through. It'll go through a turbine. It'll spin the turbine, and then you can form energy. That's how a dam works. The same thing happens inside of you billions of times a day in your mitochondria. You have a reservoir of protons. The body opens the ATPase. That's the sluice. The protons flow through. They spin the ATP turbine, and you get ATP, okay? Because the hydrogen, the phosphate groups are added to adenosine with high energy bonds by ATPase, and each of those bonds is another way to store energy. So then ATP runs around the body, releases the bonds, and gives you energy. So just think of your body at the cellular level, you're running hydroelectric dams all the time, and you're converting glucose to ATP and using it to make energy. Okay, so the electron transport chain is fundamental to this process, and this is showing you two sides of the membrane, the cell walls in the mitochondria, which, by the way, the mitochondria are really just bacteria that began to harbor in human cells a gazillion years ago, and now they've just become part of us. But that is the fundamental unit of your cell that does this process of using oxygen with fuel from glucose and food to form ATP through the electron transport chain, which is a series of proteins embedded in the membrane that does this activity for us. Glucose is broken, which is a 6-carbon molecule, is broken into 2 3-carbon molecules. These enter the cycle. It's called Krebs cycle. And at each point, different carbon bonds are broken to release energy. The electrons are moved around through the proteins in the electron transport chain. Protons are moved up to the reservoir. The reservoir dumps through ATPase, and you get phosphate groups bonded with high energy to adenosine, and now you've got ATP. Now, while this is going on, the molecules, the glucose is broken down not just into energy, but also into carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so basically your food that you eat eventually becomes simple things: carbon dioxide, water, and a little bit of energy. We breathe the carbon dioxide out as waste, and we urinate the water out as urine, okay? So that's how we get rid of the constant waste products that are created as we convert food into energy. So this is sort of the cycle of life. If you think about it, it's pretty cool. So on the planet Earth, we're sort of all the same thing, and everything's just moving around. So the carbon just moves around from one thing to another, the hydrogen moves around, and electrons move around, which electrons are just electricity, right? And that's what we're basically electrical beings. That's how we produce energy. Your nerves are just passing electricity along in the form of electrons and neurotransmitters. But basically, we eat the carbon that is stored in plants that have formed the carbon using energy from the sun, okay? They use photons, that's the energy from the sun, combined with carbon dioxide, and they form carbon bonds, which are high energy, in a substance called glucose. And that then eventually can become starch in the roots, or it can become fructose in a fruit. We eat that carbon. Our carbon then becomes ATP, carbon dioxide, and water. And guess what? Our waste fuels the plants. So the plants then take the water and the carbon dioxide that we made and convert it into high energy food molecules that we then eat and break down. So it's just this cycle that's going on and on and on and on. So it's kind of, I think, pretty cool. Next. So photosynthesis started all of this, okay? The plants use the energy from the sun. None of this happens without the energy from the sun, which is the primary source of energy that then we can then convert and reuse over and over again. The photons allow reactions to occur in chlorophyll-containing plants, okay? And then this is where we get the synthesis of organic molecules. The chloroplasts are the little factories that convert the photon energy from the sun plus the carbon dioxide and the water into usable food molecules that we can use. So carbon dioxide plus water plus a photon energy ends up being an energy-rich carbon molecule, a fruit, a root, a plant leaf, whatever, and then oxygen. So the plants breathe out oxygen as their waste. And guess what? Oxygen is our fuel, right? So this just goes back and forth. Interestingly, 115 to 120 billion tons of carbon are used in photosynthesis every year. And that's only 1 to 2% of the solar energy that hits the Earth. So that's mind-blowing if you think about it. And that is 6 times all of the energy consumption of mankind. So this is a massive thing going on every single day, every single second, this cycle of life. And when you start to think about it, it's just pretty incredible. So we need the glucose just to form ATP, just so we can do what we do. We're just moving carbon around. That's all we're doing. Brain, again, uses 20% of your resting metabolism. So on any given day, like every 5 calories you eat, 1 is going straight to the brain, okay? The brain loves glucose. It can function without it. This is why you hear about the ketogenic diet and things like that so much. The brain can function on ketones as well. Too much sugar, the brain doesn't like. Too little sugar, the brain doesn't like. Too little sugar, it's not going to function well unless you can also produce ketones. Too much sugar, you're going to produce massive amounts of inflammation and then get neurodegenerative disorders and things like that. So we don't need too many carbohydrates, right? You don't need an excessive amount. You just need some. But you have to have those some. Oh, just checking in. Thank you so much for watching this and paying attention. Once we get through this part about the biochemistry and why we even use glucose, other things will make more sense, I think, as we talk about it. All right, so far we've talked about the cycle of life, how we are all just sort of converting photon, sun energy, plus oxygen into usable food molecules that then get converted inside humans and other creatures into carbon dioxide, water, and energy, okay? And then this just goes around and around and around. But too much of this is not a good thing. So what happens with too much sugar? Well, just understand that sugar is actually glucose plus fructose, so it's not just glucose. I don't think any of us would like straight glucose. It probably wouldn't taste too good. Fructose is metabolized much more quickly than glucose straight into fat. And we're going to talk about fructose metabolism a little bit later, but it's metabolized just the same way as alcohol. The mitochondria, remember the little bacteria that harbor in human cells that are the energy factory that have that reservoir with the turbine and the electron transport chain? If you feed too much water to them, if you feed too much glucose to the mitochondria, the engine will become overwhelmed. There's just not enough enzymes to keep this going. Things start to become dysfunctional. More reactive oxygen species, which is the exhaust out of that engine, okay, the byproduct, get formed, and then there's more inflammation, more oxidative stress. So you don't want to overwhelm your mitochondria. And that's assuming that you have very healthy young mitochondria that have been repaired and fixed during the process of healing every night, right? So if you have hyperglycemia, too much of this fuel source in your blood, the mitochondria get overwhelmed. The second problem with too much sugar, which is again glucose plus fructose, is the fructose not only gets metabolized almost immediately into fat in most cases, it actually also inactivates the insulin system. Okay, more and more of the glucose becomes what's called citrate, and that goes directly into fat. So this is why people that have too much fructose on board get fatty liver disease, similar to how people that drink too much alcohol get fatty liver disease. Because that fuel source, or that source of carbon bonds that has energy, doesn't go the way that glucose does to go into the electron transport chain to make usable ATP. It gets metabolized a little bit differently and oftentimes ends up straight as fat that's just deposited wherever it can be deposited. Okay, so remember, we are just depots for carbon and electrons, okay? We're just another way to pass around electrons and electricity and carbon and oxygen, just like a plant, just like another animal. We just happen to be, we like to think, a little bit more advanced, but oftentimes that's questionable, right? So when you lose weight, where does it go? And I want you to start thinking about this. Remember what I just told you about this whole transfer of oxygen, carbon, carbon dioxide, and energy? If we have too much sugar on board and excessive amounts of carbohydrates, and a carbohydrate is just a carbon that's been hydrated, right? Carbohydrate. So when you have too much carbohydrates, it will become what's called a triglyceride or glycogen, which is another storage form of sugar. So think about this. In a plant, your sugar can be stored as a leaf or a fruit, or it can be converted into a complex carbohydrate, which is like glycogen in humans, and that'll go to the root. In humans, the glycogen generally gets stored in the liver and the muscle. So your easiest thing to burn is the sugar, the glucose, right, with ATP. The quick storage form is glycogen. The long-term storage form is a triglyceride or fat. So fat or triglycerides are just 3 fatty acids, which is just a series of carbons and hydrogens with different bonds on a glycerol backbone. That is the fat molecule. That is what you don't want floating around in your blood. So if you've ever had your triglyceride levels checked, that's what they're looking for. That is 54 molecules of carbon, 104 molecules of hydrogen, hydrogen, and then 6 molecules of oxygen. So again, we're just a bunch of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen matched up in different ways with some electrons floating around. But how you handle this and the forms that you give your body makes a big difference. So I put the picture of the little girl blowing a bubble here because that is what happens when you lose weight. It becomes carbon dioxide. Remember, we just talked about that. So somebody actually spent some time and did a calculation. And this all goes back to, if y'all remember high school physics, the conservation of mass. So by definition, you never can lose matter or mass, right? That just goes against the laws of physics. And so when you lose weight, it has to become mass. It doesn't just get burned and become heat or energy. So the mass is the carbon that goes into the exhaled carbon dioxide. Okay, so the carbons in the fat are converted to the carbon dioxide we exhale, plus some water, plus a little bit of that ATP, or the energy storage form that we talked about. That conserves the mass. We need 4 oxygen molecules to do this little process, and 2 are exhaled while 2 are urinated. So if you think about it, it's pretty cool. When you lose weight, you're actually breathing it out. Now, that doesn't mean you can sit and try to hyperventilate to lose weight. That doesn't work, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why. But effectively, when you convert your fat to energy to use it for ATP in the mitochondria, the waste products is how we conserve the mass or the carbon molecules, and they get breathed off. Okay, so glucose is just another carbon-containing molecule, just like a triglyceride, just like an amino acid. So however you're taking in your carbs, your carbohydrates, or your carbon molecules, at the end of the day, it's just a carbon molecule, right? That's going to be used in some way to convert to ATP and then to breathe out as a waste product. So just start thinking of yourself as a little bit more connected to your world, and that's probably going to help you get a more of a growth and a health mindset anyway, to start thinking about healthier foods and being a part of this whole cycle of life in a more beneficial way that doesn't involve excessive amounts of sugar with factory-made foods. Because the real problem is not the glucose, okay? It's not necessarily even the sucrose. It's just there's too much of it that we're bringing in. Our system is not and cannot be prepared for that. So what is sugar? It is generally derived nowadays of beets or sugarcane. Okay, sucrose is one glucose molecule plus one fructose molecule, so it's a disaccharide. It is not a monosaccharide. There's two different types of molecules that have a chemical bond to form sucrose. So there's a total of 12 carbons, 24 hydrogens, and 12 oxygens. It's a carbohydrate. It's a hydrated carbon molecule. Sucrose has 50% glucose, 50% fructose. The glucose molecule forms a hexagon, a 6-ring structure, and fructose forms a pentagon with some little upright rebars. So the only difference between these two things is one functional group is in one different position on each of the 6 carbon chain. That's it, but it makes a massive difference to the biochemistry of the body. Now, what is high fructose corn syrup? You've heard of this. This is a not so wonderful invention that was brought to us, in the 70s. We'll talk about that. And it's 55% fructose versus 50% and 45% glucose. Well, the reason this is great for the food industry is because fructose is so much sweeter than glucose. So even that 5% difference makes high fructose corn syrup much sweeter, so it's much more economical to add to food products. Okay, but then you're thinking, well, sugar's natural and real. How can it be bad? What about agave, honey, brown sugar, raw sugar, cane sugar? Those are all natural. They sound great, right? They're of the earth. Well, think about this. Think about the refining process just for sugarcane. Look at all the steps in this factory-made product that then goes into your system and really gets modified even a bit more to be converted to high fructose corn syrup to go into your food system. So is it really natural? Not so much. I don't think that our system was set up to eat synthesized, refined, pure sucrose molecules. We're really meant to get this stuff in combination with fiber, which is really probably one of the biggest problems we have right now. Okay, remember, what does sugar do to you? Okay, we already talked about the chemical reaction. We talked about ATPase. You probably, if you listen to anything in the wellness and health and beauty world, you've probably been hearing about spikes, glucose spikes, okay? Very trendy thing to talk about right now. This is what this is about. Your body wants to maintain a solid range of glucose, again, because your brain has to have it all the time. Your body also wants a certain acidic and base environment, wants to keep the pH neutral. Okay, and it wants a certain amount of electrolytes. So your body's going to do whatever it can do to keep that stable no matter what. How does your body keep glucose stable? With insulin. So when your body senses sugar or sucrose or glucose, once that's sensed, insulin is going to be released. Why? Because it needs to pull it out of the bloodstream to keep that level steady, because hyperglycemia is not a good thing. Hypoglycemia is not a good thing. Your body, think of your body like Goldilocks. Everything has to be perfect and in balance. Not too much, not too little of anything, okay? So if you have too much glucose, you're going to get insulin resistance over time. Why? Because your body's going to keep pushing out insulin to manage these huge glucose loads you keep dumping into it. Eventually, the receptors become used to it and start shutting down and not responding to it. This is the same thing that happens to opioids and addiction, okay? Too many opioids over time, the opioid receptors become resistant, more and more receptors are made, more and more receptors are made, you need more and more opioids, you need more and more opioids, next thing you know, you're addicted. Same thing's happening with insulin. Too much insulin, the receptors, more and more, then they become dysfunctional, then you have insulin resistance, then you've got hyperglycemia everywhere and all the problems that happen there. If you look at the top slide here, you want your blood glucose to stay sort of in that sub 100 range if possible. Every time you eat, it's going to spike. It has to, right? A certain amount of blood glucose entering the serum is going to spike your blood glucose. Well, then once your body senses that, it'll shoot out insulin, pulls it out of the blood quickly, usually deposits it in muscle if it can, or the liver, and then eventually into fat, of course. So if you have a normal system, you'll spike appropriately. You'll pull the glucose out and you'll keep this level bit of sub 100 glucose over time with just mild spikes periodically. Okay? Sadly, half of our country is insulin resistant now, and 90% of us have metabolic syndrome. So there's only 10% of this country, really less than that, I think the new number is 7% maybe, who do not have metabolic syndrome. Okay? That's not good. That doesn't bode well for the future of our country. And why? because we're just giving ourselves too much energy. Next. Oh, yeah, if you guys have questions, just throw them out there, and we'll try to answer them as we go, if not at the end. And then go ahead and share this with anybody that you would like. Who? Oh, Lauren. Good morning, Lauren. All right. So again, the body loves balance. We're Goldilocks, okay? You don't want the big bed, you don't want the small bed. You don't want the hot oatmeal, you don't want the cold oatmeal, right? You just want everything to be perfect. Again, we're going to maintain a perfect balance of glucose. We're going to fuel the brain. So what are we going to do with the rest of the glucose? We're just going to drop it into some muscle, drop it into liver, drop it into fat, whatever we can do. And guess what? When that runs out, it's just going to stay in the bloodstream and you're going to have a bunch of sugar running around, which is not good. I put a picture of this ribeye steak so that you could know what is happening to excess glucose in your body when it needs to be dropped off. That is metabolic syndrome, okay, a ribeye steak. That is a cow with metabolic syndrome. That is not normal. That is not a good thing. You don't want that much fat and muscle, okay? The bottom left picture with the little white balls and the purple, that is too much sugar and fat deposited in a liver. And then the right side, I pulled one of the MRIs from my clinic to show you the muscle in somebody's lower back. And I see this all the time, and I can tell you, of all the studies and literature I've read on back pain, maybe 1 out of 1,000 mentions muscle. But look at that muscle, all the white lines in the dark stuff. The dark stuff is a muscle, and that's in the red circle on the bottom, okay? That's the muscles that are holding the spine up, the paraspinal muscles. The white lines represent fat. Look what it looks like, just like a ribeye steak, right? That is metabolic syndrome right there. That is fatty deposition in muscle. That is dysfunctional muscle because of insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. I see it all day, every day in my clinic. A #1 problem in America, and probably one of the primary reasons most of us have back pain, is because of weak, stiff, dysfunctional muscle, not to mention the connective tissue up and down the spine. So think about that next time you want to add a little bit of extra sugar to your coffee in the morning, which hopefully you're not doing that right now. So next slide. Well, look, personally, I used to put sugar in my coffee until I realized all of this, and it took me a while to get over it. It takes a while to get over sugar because sugar is more addictive than any substance known to man. It's more addictive than probably cocaine, maybe not as addictive as nicotine. Once you can get past that first couple weeks, which are going to be miserable, then then you're gravy train. You can fix some problems, but don't think you're alone out there if you're trying to fight a sugar addiction. It is really hard. So there's only so much energy we can store as fat. So this is when you start seeing things like NAFLD, which is code for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The #1 cause of fatty liver in this country now is not alcohol, it is sugar. Obesity, so that's too much energy being stored wherever we can. We get insulin resistance. Then after a certain period of insulin resistance, you score into diabetes. Massive levels of advanced glycation end products, which is a real problem, or one of the real problems with musculoskeletal pain and excessive sugar. So if you have too much serum glucose floating around in your body and there's nowhere to deposit it anymore, what happens is the sugar will non-enzymatically, meaning it'll happen spontaneously, that you don't need an enzyme for this reaction. It'll just glom on to whatever protein it finds and it'll form a monster protein that then causes a significant amount of dysfunction in whatever tissue that is. So this really likes to happen in collagen, which is the main protein of connective tissue, bone, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, meniscus, spinal discs, etc. So you'll get these deposits of abnormal proteins in all of that connective tissue. And this is when you get stiff. This is when your joints start creaking. This is when you hear that popping and clicking. That's just a bunch of advanced glycation end products, all glommed up where they're not supposed to be, causing the works to sort of just lock up. So think of it like a ball bearing and you just decide to throw sand in there, right? Nothing's going to work anymore. That's what we're doing to ourselves with excessive amounts of sugar, in particular as it pertains to how your body feels. So in theory, technically, an unlimited amount of glycogen storage is possible, but that's just not how our bodies work. So we convert a lot of it to fat. And if we can't convert it to fat, it becomes advanced glycation end products. Oh, somebody just said they never understood, or they never heard somebody say how excess sugar might lead to back pain. Well, I know, because if people knew that, think about it, there'd be far less spinal surgery in this country, far fewer pain injections, far fewer opioids being prescribed, and the medical industry would essentially just implode. So you're probably not going to hear about that. Catherine, next. All right, and again, this is just more showing you advanced glycation end products. So it'll glom onto cartilage molecules and make the cartilage dysfunctional, synovial lining of the joints. And so you have to have a synovial lining for any joint to work. If that gets glommed up, it's not going to work right. And then it particularly deposits into muscle. And this is one of the reasons that a lot of people will get sarcopenic or have dysfunctional and thinner, useless muscles as they get older, and what contributes to what we call frailty. Okay. All right, so are we aging because of sugar? Probably. So a lot of what you consider to be aging is actually just too much sugar for too long. Not really that time has passed, but that during that time, you gave your body too much energy, okay? And the body didn't know what to do with it. So I put this picture, I found this in my research. This is a 70-year-old running around in Australia who just decided to stop eating any extra sugar about 28 years ago. And you know, she probably is functioning at the level of a 30-year-old, and she's 70. So is it really the time? No, it's what we do to ourselves during that time. So during that time of the 70 years, if she were a normal American, she would have put a bunch of fat in her liver. She would have put a bunch of fat on her body. She would have developed bad joints and bad tendons and bad ligaments because advanced glycation end products would have deposited everywhere. She would have sarcopenia and weakness. There would be stiffness in all the joints. She would have poor eyesight, poor cognition, a bad heart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So almost all of our problems are preventable, in my opinion, just by changing how we think about our lives. We just have to change our mindset on what we're thinking about, what we put in our body, why we put it in our body, when we put it in our body, and then just try to have better schedules, sleep more, things like that. There's a lot we can do to make life better, and it's really not that hard. But first, you have to understand what you're doing, and that's what this talks about. So next. Did you want me to say that? Oh. Okay, so back to what is sugar? Well, that depends on your marketing team and the FDA. I put this list here on the right. These are various names of sugar, and we have another list later. So the food industry, knowing that a lot of us are starting to look for added sugars and high fructose corn syrup, have come up with different chemical derivatives and different ways to structure the carbon rings into a molecule that they can call something else, but it's still an added sugar in your food. Okay, it's still excess energy. So you've seen things like beet sugar, dextrose, maltodextrin, agave, which is really 100% fructose. It's probably one of the worst. Corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, invert sugar, molasses, sorghum, rice syrup. I mean, just the names are very, very good. And then that's just the basic names. Then there's chemical breakdown names, which makes it even harder to recognize. But look, this was known back in, gosh, the 50s, 60s, 70s. John Yudkin, who was a contemporary of Ansel Keys of the 7-country study, which is involved into what we like to call the Mediterranean diet now, he mentioned and discussed how bad sugar was back then. Now, unfortunately, politics and society turned on him and his career was destroyed, and everybody went on the low-fat, high-carb train instead, which we are now learning has not been so good for us. This guy was on to it back then, and that was his book about it, Pure, White, and Deadly, Sugar. It's true. So how can you avoid it? Well, it's hard to avoid sugar in our country, unfortunately. That's why I don't want anybody to get too stressed out and beat yourself up. This is a game of baby steps because everything is against you. The food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical industry, the doctor, all of us, everything is conspiring to make sure that we all eat too much energy. There's 70% of our foods have added sugar. mostly found in sweet beverages. Okay, that is the primary culprit, or the danger zone, is sweetened beverages. Okay, then desserts and breakfast cereals are particularly egregious. Probably one of the best decisions we made as a family was to cut out breakfast cereals a while ago, because that is the epitome of ultra processed foods with added sugars. Adding excess sugars or agaves or things like that to your coffee and tea, another form of a sweetened beverage that gives you added sugar, and then of course candies and sugars. So remember, in the 1990s, per all of the federal regulators, sugar was not in the criteria to disqualify a food from being called healthy on branding, okay? And 60% of the foods in your grocery stores have added sugar or fructose. Things you don't think about: potato chips have added sugar, sauces have added sugar, bread, snacks, meats, soups. It's in everything. Why? Because we know in the science world and the food industry world that if you can trigger the sugar response, the insulin, and get the dopamine and the norepinephrine up in the brain from that reward center, from the response to glucose, that particular person is going to want more and more and more and more. It's the same thing with scrolling on your phone. It's dopamine hits. It's a trick. It's getting you to just use something more and more and more, using brain science against you. I want you guys to understand this so you can start to use brain science and protect yourself. So here's a whole nother list of sugar names. I mean, it's really scary when you start to think about it. Yeah, I mean, I know you can't see this. Dextrose, dry malt, honey bake, glaze, flow malt, dried raisin sweetener, lactose, which is a sugar that's found in milk. That's somewhat natural, I guess. Sorghum, sucanat, sucrovert, sugar invert. I mean, there's just creative names. To avoid added sugar essentially means you have to avoid all ultra-processed foods. The key here, I think, is that the foods with the people that eat the most ultra-processed foods and the most sugar also are picking foods that have the lowest micronutrient intake or amount, and also the lowest amounts of fiber. So not only are you giving yourself excessive amounts of sugar, but you're taking away all the good stuff that might have gone with it with these factory-made foods. So does sugar itself really cause obesity? Well, it's debatable. And the debate is ongoing. Per the regulators, our sugar consumption has actually been dropping. You see this on this graph. Obesity's gone up, sugar consumption has dropped, right? This is from the NHANES, which is the big ongoing survey of people as to their nutritional habits. But remember, it's just survey data, not very reliable. Like if I asked you right now, what did you eat for breakfast 2 days ago, and what proportion was carbohydrate, protein, and fat, you wouldn't know. But that's what survey data is. Anyway, it's the best we have in nutrition research. So following a human recollection of intake of how much sugar people have eaten, you get this graph that says, oh, it's not the sugar. Obesity has happened anyway, okay? But again, I just showed you about 100 different names for sugar, so how do you really even know if sugar's been added to your food? But anyway, we have a question. Oh, okay, yeah, we're going to add the list I have, which I can't even tell you if it's exhaustive because now they're hiding it with chemical names, but what we have, we're going to put on the next blog. With this talk, sorry. Okay. The show notes. Next slide. But beware of statistics, okay? One thing I've learned in my career is that you can manipulate numbers to say anything you want. This is something I found during my research for this talk. This nice young scientist here, I can't say his name because he's Danish, but he showed how that graph I just showed you, if you just manipulate the numbers on the x-axis versus the y-axis, you can change the relationship completely. Now, just so you know, if you go back and watch, oh gosh, what was the name of the movie about Opana and OxyContin? Dope Sick. If you go back and watch Dope Sick on Hulu, it was about the obesity epidemic in Purdue Pharma. They did this to the FDA, which you would have thought the FDA, the scientists would figure this out. They basically showed a graph and manipulated the axes to prove that narcotics weren't addictive over time. So you can make statistics mean anything. I just want you to be aware of that. So on one graph, it looks like sugar intake has nothing to do with obesity, right? The other graph, it looks like they're highly correlated until the year 2000. And then there's suddenly this drop off in sugar, but obesity keeps going. So, I think we're all still learning. Everybody's trying to figure it out, but I'm pretty sure that too much sugar is not good and generally gets deposited as fat, which if you have too much fat and your BMI, body mass index, goes over 30, then technically you're obese. Ellen has a question. Ellen wants me to talk about my vitamins. I will in the end, but I'll tell you the one that we have that can help keep that glucose steady during the day is the berberine. But we'll talk about all this at the end. If you have a specific question, go ahead and put it in there. Okay, let's move on. All right, so obesity, high fructose corn syrup, sugar, stats, and science, right? As high fructose corn syrup became more available on the market, the industry says we were just simply substituting. So our sugar intake has never really changed. Okay, but in reality, our total consumption has actually increased and we've converted more of it to fructose, which turns out is way worse for us than glucose. So more and more of our intake has become fructose-based and not glucose-based. And then more and more of us are eating more and more. So I went through the numbers, and this is from the USDA website. Basically, to sum it all up, our high fructose corn syrup intake, and I want to say this is daily, in 1970 was 0.1 teaspoon. By 2021, it's 6.9, almost 7 teaspoons of high fructose corn syrup. Other sweeteners stayed about the same. Beet sugar did drop, so from 17.8 to 12.1, and cane sugar too. But so you see, we have a lot more fructose, but in general, we still have more sweeteners total. Because in 1970, the total teaspoons was 20.9, and in 2021, it was 22. So, not good. Not only are we having more, but we've converted the percentage to more to fructose, which I already told you gets metabolized like alcohol almost directly into fat. And worse, fructose forms advanced glycation end products about 200 to 250 times faster than glucose does. So the more fructose you have in your system, the worse. And guess what else fructose does? It does not spike insulin at all. Fructose has a very low glycemic index. So is that good? Well, you don't spike your insulin and you don't have glucose floating around in your blood, but you do have fructose, which gets converted right to fat and causes advanced glycation end products. So I think this is sort of a devious trick that has been played on all of us, and we all need to understand it. Okay, Catherine has a question that we're not sure I can answer. Let's see, hold on. Okay, the question is, how many carbs per day do I recommend for a moderately active 65-year-old woman? So that is a whole nother debate as to whether or not managing your macronutrient intake really even matters at all. Like, do you need this much protein, this much fat, this much carb? At the end of the day, I already told you, we're just a big cycle of life, right? Of carbon, electrons, hydrogen, oxygen moving around. So the carbohydrates in and of themselves are not bad. It's the form of the carbohydrate. So if you told me that you just wanted to eat vegetables and whole grains and nuts all day long, every day, you could probably eat whatever you wanted because you're getting a ton of micronutrients, a ton of fiber, and it's all complex carbs that are not excessive amounts of fructose. And any fructose you're getting from a whole fruit is coming with a fiber. So to try to limit your carbohydrate intake, I think, is making life too hard on you. Like, you don't need to think about it that way. What you need to think about is how to avoid fake foods like high fructose corn syrup and added things that aren't natural, like added sugars. Like, why should a salty chip have added sugar? Because they're trying to trick your brain. So as long as you're eating a Mediterranean style diet, which is heavy in fruits and whole fresh fruits and vegetables, not just necessarily fresh, they can be cooked, of course. Whole grains, not like white bread, bunny bread, things like that, or processed carbs, but like whole grains like barley, real oats that are steel cut, maybe with some added fiber, things like that, you're not going to have the same results in your body as if you're eating refined, ultra processed foods with this very easy to manipulate fructose glucose relationship that hits your system and causes havoc. So I hate to tell somebody to limit their carbs. It depends on what kind of carbs you're eating. Oh, all right. So one thing I've started doing is look at the total, and this is something that the nutrition labels have to have nowadays. So if you look there, it says calories 230, and then they break it down into macronutrients. So the fat, which they then also break down the cholesterol, the sodium, and then the total carbs. So the total carbs here is 37, and then there's dietary fiber of 4. So if you take 37 minus 4, that is your net carbs, okay? So it's 33, because each gram of fiber will net out a gram of carbs because the fiber changes how it processes through the gut, how much actually gets absorbed, things like that. So if you go to the grocery store nowadays, and this is still ultra processed food, so I'm not like advocating it, there's a lot of packaging that says keto friendly, keto this, keto that. All they're doing is adding fiber to net out the carbs, okay? Still not natural, still ultra processed, but at least there's a little bit of fiber in there. Now, it's debatable what kind of fiber they're putting. Is it soluble? Is it insoluble? Usually it's insoluble fiber. You do still need soluble fibers. Again, a whole nother debate. But you really want a ratio of it 10 to 1 at the most. 5 to 1 is better. 1 to 1 would be ideal, right? But you just want to get that ratio of total carbs to dietary fiber as low as you can get it. And then your carbs start to become a little bit healthier. All right, so let's talk quickly about factory foods, which is one of the real reasons we have arthritis in this world today. Is that okay? We're here. Okay, so I don't think it's just the added sugar. I think that's a huge problem, and I think we should all try to avoid it. But really, it's the factory-made fake food, the ultra-processed foods to which we are subjugated on a daily basis. I still eat ultra-processed foods because if you live in America, it's almost impossible not to. You just need to be cognizant of it, limit it, and try to eat as much whole food to negate the effects as you can. Okay, so look at the US fast food industry market over time. Starting in 2012, the bottom of the graph, 2022, so that's what, a decade, went from 230 billion to 330 billion, okay? So they added $100 billion in business, 10 billion a year, okay? So we're eating more fast food than ever. We're also eating more sugar than ever. We're also eating more high fructose corn than ever. We're also eating more salt, things like that too. The bottom right slide is even more telling. That real disposable income per capita has grown. So I know that you guys hear about how terrible things are on the news all the time, but honestly, I mean, our quality of life has improved so massively over the past couple decades. It's almost mind-blowing when you think about everything we have. The disposable income that we have now relative to what we had to spend on necessities like a roof over our head, electricity, and food has grown. So we have all this extra money now, and our food budget has dropped. So food has become far cheaper, so we don't have to use as much of our money for food. And I'm saying we, meaning like aggregate society, right? Obviously, there's one-offs either way. But this is almost not a good thing because this means food has become very cheap to produce. What does that mean? They found cheap chemicals to add to it, cheap sweeteners to add to it, cheap factory ways to deconstruct it and put it back together again, and worse, cheap monoculture, huge farm agricultural practices that have destroyed biodiversity, destroying the soil. Pesticides have made food cheaper, but guess what? Glyphosate is in almost all the air we breathe and the water we drink nowadays because it is just so everywhere in the globe. Why? All to make food cheaper so that we buy more and more of it. So I think that we really are just facing a combination of probably perfect storm, if you will. But if you just focus on added sugars, you'll be helping yourself a lot. And that's just a baby step you can make now to make your life better and to make your body feel better. Yeah, so the ratio is, and I'll have to fact check myself, but I think the worst you want is 10-to-1, carb to fiber, ideally 5-to-1. And then 1-to-1 would be a perfect net zero, right? Net carb zero food. Just the more fiber you can jam into anything you're eating, the better, is how I would look at it. Okay? Alternatives. Oh, like alternative sugars? Yeah, we're going to talk about alternative sugars coming up. Okay. So is it the bad food at the restaurants? Is it our lack of activity? Or is it just the sugar? And I put a couple more graphs. Remember, if I change the x-axis to the y-axis, this could look better or worse. The red line on the left one is showing food eaten away from home over time, and then food eaten at home over time. As you can see, we're making fewer and fewer home-cooked meals, eating with our friends and family, which develops solid relationships, right? More and more food's being in quick, on the go, fast food. Now, some of that's going to be a sit-down dinner at, like, you know, a fancy restaurant with your family. But generally speaking, a lot of this, less home-cooked meals with whole foods at home, which involves that whole process of cooking and the whole process of enjoying your family and friends. More and more restaurant-made food, fast food, which I just showed you how we've added $100 billion to their coffers over the past decade. So this is one of the reasons that you're not feeling so good nowadays. And then, of course, our inactivity levels with the smartphones and the computers, and everything's just so easy nowadays. I mean, honestly, I could probably sit on the couch all day long, and I'm surprised nobody's come in with a delivery service for diapers so that you never have to move off the couch to go to the bathroom, because you can do everything. I can order my food and get it delivered. I can get the mail picked up. I can have somebody come, oh, if I want a new chair, they'll come and they'll build it for me. I mean, you literally don't have to do anything anymore in this world unless you make yourself do it. You know, like when I go shopping to the store, I'll try to park as far away as I can to get opportunistic exercise, because we're just so inactive nowadays. But not to say activity is the only way to lose weight. It's not. In fact, that's the least efficient way to lose weight. But movement helps a lot of other things. But I'm just trying to point out, it's not just the sugar, it's everything. But sugar's in your control, and you can handle a lot of, you can also handle how many times you go out to eat too, of course. So let's move on. Enough. What about fiber supplements? Yes, I think that you could definitely add fiber supplements. Inulin is the common one you see that's an insoluble, and then psyllium husk is the best one, I think, because it's got insoluble. But when you add psyllium husk to things, it makes it kind of gelatinous and goopy, and that texture is a big turnoff for a lot of people. So speaking of turnoff and texture and things like that, one of the reasons restaurant foods and ultra-processed foods are so bad for you is they remove the fiber, because they want to control the texture, because they've spent decades figuring out the mouthfeel of food that is most pleasing and most likely to sell more food. So they pull the fiber out of foods. Not only does it change the mouthfeel and allow them a little bit more, I guess, agility or ease of changing it with engineering, but then you can freeze the food, you can transport it, and you can quickly cook it. Have you ever tried to make beans from the dry, you know, to where you eat it, like dried white beans or red beans or whatever? You got to soak it in water overnight, right? Just so you can cook it. That the fiber is just so solid. But if you could pull the fiber out, then it's not going to spoil. It cooks quicker. You can freeze it faster. You can transport it, and then you can engineer it a lot better. It's easier to eat. It's easier to chew. It's easier to digest. All of that, pulling fiber out of anything, it's good for the food industry, and it's good to trick your brain into thinking you're eating something yummy and good, but it's basically a way to destroy a human being slowly over time. And then you add sodium and sugar to induce brain cravings, okay, to get the dopamine hits of food. And then the worst thing about restaurant food, I think, is that they're reusing seed oils over and over again. So not only are they using bad oils, but then they're reusing them and reheating them. So you're basically cooking food in a toxic sludge and serving it to human beings. And for some reason, that is okay. We used to eat 100 to 300 grams of fiber a day. Okay, as we evolved on this cycle of life that we talked about, the planet Earth, now we eat 12 grams of fiber a day in America. Now, that's probably one of the bigger problems. And then instead of fiber, we're eating added sugars and a bunch of chemicals, food coloring, things like that. One of the most egregious things, I think, is how we're treating our babies now. The chart is showing you the increase in childhood obesity rates. The CDC and the FDA just approved, not the CDC, the FDA just approved weight loss drugs for children, and bariatric surgery rates in children have exponentially increased over the past few years. So kids as young as 12 are getting sleeve surgeries now. Why? Because of what we're feeding them starting pre-birth, during their development in utero, and then after birth. Look at what's in baby formula. 43% of it is corn syrup solids. Straight up high fructose corn syrup, plus a little bit extra sucrose, plus a bunch of oils. Now, how is that good for anybody? But that is covered by WIC, and that is what most people are feeding their babies in the world. And then this is just a picture of an obese baby that is just all, I mean, not a good picture, right? It doesn't make you feel comfortable, but that is happening more and more and more and more often now. Okay, and so what's going to happen? All these kids are going to grow up, they're going to have diabetes by the time they're 16. Now, what is that going to do to our country and our healthcare system? So sugar itself is actually bad, not talking about fast food restaurants and oils and ultra-processed foods and everything. Let's talk about why sugar is bad and why it's bad for your cartilage, your bone, your muscle. So again, if you overwhelm the mitochondria, which is where your ATPase is, your electron transport chain, if you overwhelm it and just keep jamming the food in, eventually it's going to break down, right? It never has time to heal, never has time to do self-repair, can't get rid of waste byproducts, so you start having excessive byproducts, which are your reactive oxygen species. Those then go on to cause oxidative stress, which is when you damage lipid membranes, you misfold proteins, you mutate DNA. You're basically destroying yourself with excessive amounts of electrons folding around and binding to things. You get more advanced glycation end products, which particularly love collagen, which is in all of our tendons and ligaments and cartilage. You get insulin overproduction and insulin resistance. You get fat deposition anywhere the body can find to jam it. And then you have what's called autophagy impairment, and that is a lack of the body's ability to rest and repair. Because if you keep feeding a cell, it never has time to take a break and rest. This is why I'm a big advocate of time-restricted eating now. It forces you to give yourself a daily time frame whereby your body can repair itself. Autophagy and mitophagy is when your body repairs itself. So right now, with all the excess energy and the nonstop eating, you never have a downtime. There's never a maintenance phase. So too much sugar in the blood, we already talked about it. You can go to too many advanced glycation end products. The mitochondria gets overwhelmed, you get oxidative stress. Okay, eventually, and this is just showing you in a blood vessel what happens. This is when you get deposition of oxidized low-density lipoproteins, or LDLs, that then get filled with macrophages from the immune system, and then you get atherosclerotic plaquing, and then a plaque flies off, and you either have a stroke or a heart attack. All of this is just because of excessive amounts of energy. The body doesn't know what to do with it, okay? I think the advanced glycation end product problem is particularly important for musculoskeletal tissue. All right, so let's talk about healthy juice, right? So here's a chart from 2006 study showing the bottom axis is the number of juice servings per day given to children, and the top axis is rates of BMI, or changes in obesity, right? Elevation of body mass index. So this was a study where they looked in particular at lower socioeconomic children and compared juice consumption to obesity. As you drink more juice per day, obesity rates rise. Why? Because all juice is straight fructose, if they don't add sugar on top of that, okay? So if you squeeze an orange, you're gonna get fresh orange juice. Sounds good, right? But you basically just extracted all the fiber from the fructose, and now you're just drinking the fructose. So I think one of the easiest things people can do to make their lives healthier is stop drinking, period, end of story, full stop, because it's straight up fructose. Say what? Oh, yeah. You got to stop drinking fruit juice. I mean, and if you're giving your kids fruit juice, you know, I'm not here to judge or anything, but I just want you to understand what it is. It is a shot of fructose. Next. So I used to think that, oh, it's honest. It's got to be good. It says natural. It says organic. It's still just straight fructose, okay? So the ingredients here Our filtered water and organic apple juice from concentrate. What is that? That is a code word for sugar. So when you take fruit juice and you concentrate it, you're taking all the water out, and it's straight up sugar or fructose. So I think all of this is true, but it's just clever marketing. You're still giving your kids shots of fructose. So maybe just milk and water for a while, I think would help a lot of the problems that we're seeing develop in children. Yeah, don't drink your sugar. Don't drink your fruit. Eat your fruit. Fruit is healthy. Fruit's filled with micronutrients, awesome phytochemicals for health, and a ton of fiber. All right, next. So the myth of healthy juice. So this is one thing that you can do for yourself now if you find yourself in this camp, is limit your fruit juice consumption. Just like you shouldn't be drinking full sugar soda and you shouldn't be adding agave to your coffee like I used to. Agave is straight fructose. I mean, what could I have done worse but that? Nothing. So you try to eat 10 apples in 10 minutes, okay? Just sit down with 10 apples, try to eat them all and see how far you get. You're not going to get very far, but that's what a 500 ml or a soda can of apple juice is. It's 10 apples smushed, fiber and micronutrients extracted, sugar, fructose in. 55 grams of sugar, okay? 4.2 grams in each teaspoon. So 13 teaspoons of sugar per soda can size thing of apple juice. It's a little scary when you think about it. So don't drink your fruit or vegetables. Eat them. And even vegetable juice, you think that sounds even better, right? It's basically the same, but one interesting thing about the vegetable juice is the massive amounts of sodium relative to fruit juice and soda. There's way more sodium in vegetable juice than in a can of Coca-Cola. So I'm not sure that's not even the right answer. And then remember, fructose gets converted almost directly into very low density lipoproteins, which is the dangerous form of LDLs that causes heart attacks. Because fructose is metabolized like alcohol and goes almost straight into fat. What about a smoothie? Yes, I think smoothies are way better than juice because at least you're keeping the fiber in there. I mean, you're pulverizing it with the Ninja or whatever you use to make it, but you're still going to get the fiber. Now, with a smoothie, you're going to smush up, 4 or 5 different fruits. It would be hard for you to sit and eat all those whole fruits in one setting, right? But a smoothie, you can just down that in 5 minutes. So it's a more efficient way to get all of the nutrients and the fiber and the fructose. But because it's efficient, it's easier to take in excess energy. So if that's your last resort and all you can do, sure, but better would be to, whatever you were going to put in the smoothie, just eat it whole. And you'll be much better off. Now, if you are going to make a smoothie, you should add a fat, like a healthy fat, like avocado oil, maybe some peanut butter or almond butter, even better. And then try to add some green leafy vegetables to break up the fructose load from the sugars. And then back to the fiber supplement question, perhaps you add some psyllium husk or some inulin as well. All right, let's talk about low fat myths. So remember back when our awesome government told us that low fat was a good idea, and that's when things like SnackWells, which I used to eat, full disclosure, came out? Well, all that happened then was the food industry went on this bandwidth of, oh, it's fat-free, low fat, 40% less fat. What did they replace it with? Sugar. And then sugar and fructose, and then high fructose corn syrup, which again, you're basically replacing fat with fat, but it's a pre-fat. So it's not fat, it's fructose, which becomes fat, so it's pre-fat. So you're eating low fat, but it's really not low fat, okay? You're eating fat plus some pre-fat. And that's what happened to our country over time, over the past few decades. So we're eating too much sugar and fructose. The way it's metabolized, it goes straight into fat. 80% of a glucose molecule goes to the body, to all of the different things we have to do, and 20% goes to the liver. Most of that gets converted to glycogen. Some gets converted to fat. 100% of your fructose goes straight to the liver, and almost all of that gets converted to fat, particularly very low density lipoproteins, which are not good for you. Okay? And then that's because the citrate's taken out of the TCA, the Krebs cycle, and dropped into fat. So fructose is metabolized into fat, and it's basically metabolized just like alcohol, the way the chemical reactions all work out. So perhaps the obesity epidemic is related to added sugars that replace fat. Perhaps it's the seed oils in the restaurants. Perhaps it's just too much restaurant food. We don't know. It's a whole combination of events. But I think one thing you can do is avoid anything that's too unnatural, okay? So the food industry is one of the primary problems that you and I face. We're never going to avoid it completely, but the more we recognize it and can account for it, change our behaviors, the better. High fructose corn syrup is considered GRAS by the FDA. What does that mean? Generally recognized as safe, okay? We know it's not safe. We know it's massively dangerous, but it is still considered safe by the FDA, right? Meanwhile, there's debates about things like CBD as to whether or not that's safe. But high fructose corn syrup is totally okay. Guess what else is okay? They just approved chicken meat and beef made in a lab from a single cell that they're growing in a lab. Now you tell me that a lab-grown meat product is going to be the same as one grown in the fields on our beautiful planet Earth with the system that has evolved over a gazillion years. I'm not sure. I don't think I want to eat it, but that's my personal opinion. Okay, so anything is better than sugar sodas. I'm just going to throw that out there now, particularly the way they used to be made with massive amounts of high fructose corn syrup. Now they're actually trying to modify it a little bit. In fact, I just read an article about the new CEO of Pepsi and Frito-Lay is trying to make their snack foods and sodas a little bit healthier because they have realized in their market research and their reams of data that they have that people are still going to drink soda and eat potato chips. So the least we can do is make them slightly healthier. I think that's probably better than doing nothing at all. And I'm all for that. But I want you guys to limit your soda and limit your chips if you can, because obviously they're not good for you, right? So again, I already told you a red Coke has way less sodium than vegetable juice. So if you're hypertensive, which do you pick? Well, unfortunately, sugar leads to hypertension more than salt does, generally speaking. But a red Coke, and I don't mean to disparage just Coca-Cola, okay? It's just the most commonly recognized brand. Obviously, there's other soda brands. A full sugar soda will have more sugar than anything. A single can is 13% of the daily recommended amount of calories that you would need in a day, right? And remember, our daily RDA of calories is based on our average population. So as our population gets bigger, the average number of calories that we need gets more. But is that really what we need? No, we probably really need this many calories per day. The current CDC recommendations, which was a huge fight between the food industry and health advocates, is to keep sugars at less than 10% of your daily calories. Most nutrition people think it should be less than 6%, but there was a big fight, particularly with the food industry as it pertains to school meals, because it was going to be too hard to do that. So they kept it at 10%. Which is still too much if you know how sugar is processed in the body. Okay. So the easiest thing, don't drink juice, don't drink full sugar soda. You're already cutting out massive amounts of sugar on a yearly basis that way. You don't want insulin resistance. That's a fundamental core problem of a lot of our chronic diseases, okay? I'm not going to get into the slide too much, but basically you end up with toxic byproducts because your mitochondria are overwhelmed. That destroys all tissue in your body. So let's quickly talk about sugar in the gut, because I know you guys have heard about the gut biome and leaky gut and everything. So gut dysbiosis is when your bad bacteria outgrow your good bacteria. So we are basically just transport vehicles for bacteria and viruses, really, and electrons and carbon. Your gut is filled with about 100 trillion bacteria. I think that's 3 times the number of cells, 2 or 3 times the number of human cells we have. So you're actually more bacteria than human cells. But most of it's good bacteria that's evolved with us and is doing things for us. So the bacteria will digest a portion of the food that you eat and create things like short-chain fatty acids, neurotransmitters, different little proteins you need, and they'll break down the food into substances that you need to make, like serotonin for your brain, dopamine, that you need to make muscle, bone, etc. Now, when you eat ultra-processed foods that are devoid of fiber, where all the fiber's been taken out and the micronutrients, it doesn't go through the gut in the same rate of speed, and it feeds different bacteria. Some bacteria were evolved to digest cellulose, which is like when you eat celery, that's a lot of cellulose, insoluble fiber. Some bacteria have evolved to live on just straight up sugar. You don't want the latter, you want the former. So you want to populate your gut with fiber-friendly bacteria, which means you have to eat a lot of fiber. You have to have fiber in your diet. You don't need to take probiotics. You just need to eat a lot of fiber, a lot of whole vegetables and fruits, the Mediterranean lifestyle. So when your bad bacteria outgrow the good, you get dysbiosis. So what happens is the tight junctions between the endothelial cells and that line the gut, okay, the tight junctions become less tight. And now there's ways for toxins, bacteria to get through, different substances you don't want to get into the bloodstream. That is what the leaky gut is, okay? Used to be poo-pooed, used to be laughed at. Now we know this is real, and this is a true source of a lot of our problems. So one way to fix your life is to fix your gut. And one way to do that is just eat more fiber and less straight up sugar, okay? And you need more biodiversity in your gut. The only way to get biodiversity is to eat different foods. So you can't always eat the same thing every day, because then you just get a monopopulation of bacteria, which, just like monocultures of agriculture, is not good for the earth. It's not good for your gut. This is a picture of an inflamed colon from a colonoscopy. Red, angry, all these excessive blood cells. I mean, you just know bad stuff is going in the bloodstream through there. So you'll get excessive amounts of mono and disaccharides, so that's your sugar molecules, right? Pass through the small intestine, and those favor organisms that like simple carbs, the proteobacterias. And you're starving the bacteria that rely on complex carbs that like the cellulose and celery, for instance. So then you get increased lipopolysaccharide inflammation, leaky gut, and all kind of problems. Fewer short-chain fatty acids are made. Your gut has nothing to ferment to help you out, fewer ketones, things like that. So ultra-processed foods are basically creating a lack of biodiversity and a dysbiosis in your gut, which is not giving you the materials you need to function and to feed your cartilage, to feed your muscle, to feed your nervous cells in your brain, really. Fiber will help. I love this picture because that is how sugar is supposed to be eaten. That is a sugar cane. Now, if anybody out there, and I've tried it because I'm in Louisiana, but if you try to chew on a piece of sugar cane, it's not nearly as sweet as you would think it would be, and it's really hard to chew because it's basically like really thick celery with a little bit of sugar is what it's like. It's basically like bamboo. But that is how nature put sweetness on the planet for us. They did not extract it and add chemicals and make it super, super sweet like fructose, okay? Fiber is what your gut bacteria need. So a couple things you could do for yourself. Cut out juice, try to cut out full sugar soda, and then add fiber to your life, and you're solving a tremendous number of problems that you might have with how you feel. Okay? Also, the fiber induces your gut hormones to go forth and say, I'm full. Everybody's heard about Mounjaro and the semaglutide and the GLP-1 drugs, obesity, the magic pill for obesity, right? They work awesomely. Why do they work well? Because they tell the person that they feel full, they don't want to eat anymore. I mean, it's not magic. People on GLP-1 inhibitors, people after bariatric surgery, don't eat as much. They don't eat as much added sugar. So they get better. But a caveat of this is, as you eat more fiber, you're going to trade fat for gas. So you will produce more flatulence because your bacteria in your large intestine are going to be able to ferment the fiber, make the neurotransmitters and the proteins and the different messengers and fatty acids that you need to function at an optimal level and to age well. But you're going to trade that for a little bit of gas. So just beware. But that is a great sign of good gut health. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Somebody out there just said they're taking the berberine that we have and they've noticed their cravings have gone down. Berberine is derived of a plant bark, and it's as effective for controlling glucose levels as metformin is. So berberine is great if you want to manage your glucose levels. And look, one of the reasons people continue to eat late at night is you get that glucose spike, which gives you a dopamine spike in your brain. When the dopamine goes down, your body wants more, but each spike is lower and lower and lower, and each down spike is bigger and bigger and bigger. So you just want more and more and more. If you can keep that dopamine from spiking by maintaining a solid blood glucose level, you will have fewer cravings. So I'm glad it's working. Do we need digestive enzymes? If you're talking about the ones that are in your stomach and gut naturally, of course you need them. If you're talking about taking exogenous digestive enzymes, I don't think so. I think if you eat a healthy diet filled with fiber and whole foods, probably not. But if you find you're not getting enough fiber to digest your food, then yes. Okay, so we know sugar is bad. We know we should avoid it. If we eat too much of it, it's going to get excessively stored. It's too much glycogen. And then when we overwhelm the glycogen stores, you're going to get fat deposited in muscle, like the ribeye steak I showed you, fat deposited in the liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, fat deposited all over your body, visceral fat. You're also going to get mitochondrial overload. The mitochondria is going to fail. You're going to have excessive amounts of reactive oxygen species and oxidative stress. That in turn is going to destroy proteins, mutate DNA, destroy cell membranes, and just generally cause havoc at the cellular level. You're going to have way too many advanced glycation end products. You're going to develop insulin resistance, and then nothing's going to work well. And then guess what? You're going to be one of the 93% of Americans with metabolic dysfunction. And then fructose is even worse for all of this. So if you have to have a sweetener, please just try not to make it fructose or high fructose corn syrup. Oh, we have a question. The question is when, how, and how much do I suggest taking berberine? Oh, sorry. This is going to be dependent on how you feel on berberine. So some people, if you take berberine, it'll drop your blood glucose too much and you won't feel so good. Other people, it doesn't affect them at all. Generally speaking, though, the capsules we have, if you take 1 to 2 a day, maybe 3, just probably 30 minutes before a meal, I think that's going to help keep things even. But probably you should just see how you feel because, like I said, some people it'll affect them a little bit more dramatically than others. But berberine, like when I take it at night before dinner because generally my nighttime meal is my more heavier, bigger meal during the day. And look, I love pasta. I still eat shrimp scampi and things like that. I modify the recipes to add fiber and have extra vegetables and healthy fats. But I'll take berberine before that meal, for instance. And then in the mornings I take it. I don't generally take it during the day because I'm too busy and running around anyway. But generally, right before a meal is all you really need to do, but I would see how you feel on it before you start taking it regularly.
Since alcohol cravings sometimes sugar cravings with berberine help.
The question is, since alcohol cravings are sometimes sugar cravings, would berberine help? I think alcohol cravings are a little bit different because alcohol gets metabolized like fructose. As I said, and alcohol does a lot of other things, and alcohol gets metabolized by the brain, which is why people get drunk, right? Nobody gets drunk on fruit juice, but you get the side effects of the damaging products of fructose like fat. But alcohol will actually be directly metabolized in the brain, and then that changes levels of dopamine in the reward pathway center. So it's a little bit different. I don't think berberine, if somebody has cravings for alcohol and it's not just cravings for like a sugary daiquiri, let's say, or a sugary margarita, that's hard to say. But in general, if you're drinking enough sugary alcohol drinks, then yeah, berberine would help maintain the blood glucose level. But I can't say for sure it would change the craving for the alcohol part of that drink. Mike says the well theory berberine works. Well, thank you, Mike. All right, this slide's too busy. Let's move on. Okay. So basically, we want to avoid high fructose corn syrup. So this shows you as high fructose corn syrup consumption has gone up. And this is from, again, the National Institutes of Health, a survey study, gout prevalence has gone up. So now we're getting into more of the arthritis inflammatory conditions. So as we've eaten more sugar over time in the form of high fructose corn syrup, 55% fructose, 45% glucose, gout has gone up in prevalence. And then we're going to talk about why that might be. I lost my producer, hold on. Okay, so gout is formed when you drink juice the same way it's formed when you drink alcohol. So a lot of people think gout is associated with beer, which it is, because beer has a lot of purines in it from the yeast and also alcohol, both of which are metabolized eventually into uric acid, which then if you get enough of the urate in your bloodstream, it'll precipitate or it'll come out of solution into a crystal, and the crystals get deposited in joints or tendons or where tendons attach to joints, so synovial lining. And these crystals are very, very inflammatory and very painful. So high fructose corn syrup was invented by the Japanese in the 1960s, introduced to our market in 1975, and ever since then, the prevalence of gout has just grown and grown and grown. And not just gout, general hyperuricemia. So people that check uric acid levels like I do in my patients, I've noticed a lot of people with uric acid over the recommended amounts of 5.5 or 6.5, I think it's milligram per deciliter, female male. So hyperuricemia is linked closely to metabolic syndrome and hypertension. So you don't get gout just from steaks and just from crawfish and just from beer. You really get it from fruit juice. So this is just one small, simple signal that we're giving ourselves too much energy in the form of fructose in this country. Next. What? So let's talk about, was that a question or just you? All right. Sugar and rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis. So cells in people with rheumatoid arthritis have had metabolic alterations, and there's actually a shift to glycolysis away from oxidative phosphorylation. And this results in more reactive oxygen species relative to the amount of energy that's produced. And then there's more inflammation. Okay. There was a 2017 survey study of 217 people with rheumatoid arthritis. And those people, almost 13% reported or endorsed that sugar, when they noticed that they ate sugar, their rheumatoid arthritis would flare. And about 12% blamed dessert in particular. And then another study found that women that drink one sugar-sweetened beverage per day, just one can of juice, one full sugar soda, one cup of coffee with agave added, have a 63% higher chance of developing rheumatoid arthritis. I see rheumatoid arthritis show its face in somewhere between the age of 40 and 60 in most people when they get diagnosed. And this is probably one of the reasons why. I put this picture of Gatorade because you get all these athletes and celebrities endorsing these sugary drinks, right? Well, Gatorade was designed for elite athletes that are depleting their glycogen stores during their sporting event. But I can guarantee you most elite athletes today are probably not even drinking Gatorade because they know the dangers of added sugar. Gatorade and sports drinks are actually mostly consumed by children and sedentary children in this country. They're marketed to them. So don't be fooled just because you see an athlete drinking something. That does not mean it's healthy. Okay, so again, sugar is one of the primary reasons your joints are creaky, I'm telling you. So it is highly associated with both osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis and other inflammatory arthritides such as gout. Okay, we think that hyperglycemia forces chondrocytes are the cartilage-forming cells, into a more osteogenic potential versus chondrogenic potential, okay? So the chondrocytes start to form more of the transition bone material that we see in growing bone, and we think that might be associated with why spurs form, okay? You've had spurs everywhere, right? You got spurs in your Achilles tendon, your plantar fascia, all around your knee joints, your fingers have spurs. Why? Because you're feeding your chondrocytes too much sugar, and it forces them into a condition whereby they make bone versus cartilage, and they're not repairing the cartilage, so there's no healthy cartilage. Higher concentrations of glucose have been shown to promote osteogenesis, bone formation, and not chondrogenesis. And then, of course, you're changing your gut biome and producing a more inflammatory milieu or paradigm, like your whole body is just inflamed all the time, and that means your chondrocytes never have a chance to repair and regenerate. And also, you're overwhelming the mitochondria that are in all of the joint tissues. They never have a chance to repair and regenerate. Everything in your body can fix almost any problem if you just give it a chance. If you are constantly feeding your body fructose and sugar, you will never give your body, particularly your connective tissue cells, a chance to rest, shut down, send the workers home, and fix the equipment. So chondrocytes don't have a blood supply. So they're actually mostly using an anaerobic metabolism, not the electron transport chain. There is some of that going on, but they're actually getting their fuel from a different sort of a way. It's all of the surrounding joint tissues that are using the oxidative phosphorylation. But they will use glucose as a precursor for glycosaminoglycans, which are a fundamental building block of the cartilage molecule, okay? And they must be able to sense the available oxygen and glucose. If they sense too much glucose in the area, everything goes crazy. There's total chaos in your joint and nothing gets built right. Nothing gets repaired correctly. There's too much inflammation and oxidative stress. And we know that diabetic cartilage has enhanced inflammation when it's stimulated by cytokines. So let's say you get inflamed for some reason and you're diabetic, your cartilage is going to respond very, very poorly with enhanced inflammation, okay? Diabetic cartilage has also been proven to have more oxidative stress and more of what's called the polyol metabolic pathway, which we're about to talk about. Okay, so again, excessive glucose in your system leads to more glycation. That's those monster proteins that I told you mess everything up, make you feel stiffer, make your joints creak, and give you that kind of funny looking cartilage that we call arthritis. Too much glucose also goes down all these other pathways because it can't go through the mitochondria because the mitochondria are fully overwhelmed and breaking down. One of the main ways that diabetics have tissue problem is because of sorbitol. Glucose, when it can't be converted by the mitochondria into usable ATP, there's no more place to put glycogen, there's no more adipose tissue to sit into, it'll form what's called sorbitol, which is extremely toxic. It does this with an enzyme called aldolase reductase, okay? So sorbitol, this pathway is on the bottom left is showing that. Glucose becomes sorbitol, which becomes, guess what? Fructose. So your body can make its own fructose. How does it do it? When you have too much glucose in the system. So really, we just got to really control the added glucose and fructose. Diabetics get so much sorbitol, it just becomes toxic in and of itself, okay? Because the body is just madly trying to figure out what to do with all this excess energy. So the sorbitol becomes fructose by way of an enzyme called sorbitol dehydrogenase. Your NAD levels are depleted. One of the supplements I have is NMN to help people refill their NAD stores. Alcohol metabolism, fructose metabolism deplete your NAD levels as well. It's one of the primary reasons have a hangover is lack of NAD. So NMN will replace that. So sorbitol becomes fructose through sorbitol dehydrogenase, okay? So then you've got more fructose, and then guess what? That becomes more fat, or forms advanced glycation end products at a 250x rate of glucose. The retina, okay, the kidneys, and the Schwann cells surrounding nerves, okay, the things that make nerves conduct electricity efficiently, lack the enzyme sorbitol dehydrogenase. So sorbitol simply collects in those tissues and becomes toxic. This is why diabetics get neuropathic, why they have retina problems, and why they have kidney failure. And it's all just too much sugar getting converted to sorbitol, destroying everything around it. All right, so this is a study where they took mice and they surgically went in and gave them a meniscal tear, okay? They found that if they blocked this certain glucose receptor, the GLUT1 receptor, very bad arthritis would develop. If that glucose receptor was induced, there was no arthritis. So was it the meniscal tear or was it the amount of glucose? This study seems to indicate or suggest that it's the level of glucose in the setting of an injury. So remember, your body has a unique, uncanny, amazing, wonderful ability to heal itself if given the chance. If that mouse that had the surgically induced meniscal tear was diabetic, even more severe cartilage destruction would happen. So this study suggested that just improving glucose metabolism could help with arthritis, even in the setting of a surgically induced meniscal tear. Healthy cartilage has the ability to adapt in changes in glucose levels in your bloodstream because of the receptor GLUT1, like how much of the receptor is expressed or put into the cell membrane, how much is not expressed or not put there. Osteoarthritic cartilage is unable to do this because the cells have been overrun by glucose and all of the normal feedback loops and systems that would have put that GLUT receptor out there have been destroyed because of oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, advanced glycation end products. Overwhelmed mitochondria. All right, so again, in the cytosol, which is a fluid surrounding the mitochondria within the cell, glucose becomes pyruvate, right? 6 carbon molecule to 2 3 carbon molecules. And then one of them will become lactate. Lactate is actually, you've heard about lactic acid and whatnot as like the muscle burn. That's a myth that's been dispelled. Lactate is actually how excess acid is managed. So when you have a dysfunctional mitochondria and too many of these protons are being produced, the hydrogen, and they're not being stored in the reservoir to go through ATPase, but the reservoir is overflowing everywhere, and the cells get acidic, one of the ways the body tries to counteract that is forming lactate, which can bind up some of that acid, okay? The problem with the acidic environment that is created with this crappy metabolism going on because the mitochondria are overwhelmed is that the cells cannot make what's called the extracellular matrix. So all of your tendons, your skin, the lens in your eyes, the cornea, nerves, myelin, cartilage, ligaments, think of it, they all have what's called an extracellular matrix. So between each cell is a matrix of proteins and tissues and fibers that keeps it all together, and it's biologically active. It's sort of like if you're a fish in the water would be your matrix. We make an extracellular matrix. Well, in an acidic environment induced by too much glucose, you can't make a good extracellular matrix. It's dysfunctional, and you get arthritis. You get pain. You get stiff joints. You get creaky joints. So the osteoarthritic chondrocytes make more acid during their metabolic processes, more lactate than normal ones. They have very poor mitochondrial function. No glucose can enter into the TCA cycle, so not enough energy is made. So your cartilage, while you're giving your body too much energy, your cartilage is not getting enough energy because the metabolism's been all screwed up. And then it doesn't get a chance to repair itself. Now, remember the glycation, the advanced glycation end products we talked about? That is effectively browning. So here's a beautiful steak that's being seared, right? It's being browned. That browning is the non-enzymatic reaction of advanced glycation. So you are creating advanced glycation end products on that food product on purpose and then eating it. That's actually going on in your body at a much slower rate of speed, obviously, over time. But that is what you're doing to your cartilage, your bone, your muscle, your tendons, your ligaments, your skin, wrinkles, advanced glycation end products. All of that is from too much sugar, too much oxidative stress. I mean, obviously, there's other ways to get oxidative stress, cigarette smoking, pollution, things like that. But generally speaking, just excessive energy in the form of sucrose, particularly fructose, does this to you. So the cartilage in your extracellular matrix will become glycated. And when it's glycated, there's these abnormal proteins glommed onto the nicely braided collagen structure. Then the fibers cannot move smoothly the way they're supposed to, and you get stiff. This is why most diabetics, 100% of them, have very stiff, tight Achilles tendons. That leads to forefoot pressure, and this is why one of the primary places we see a diabetic ulcer is under the big toe, from too much forefoot pressure from a stiff tendon, from too many advanced glycation end products, combined with excessive amounts of sorbitol in the tissue and an inability to heal and a poor immune system. So more advanced glycation end products in your joint means less proteoglycans, which is a water-holding molecule, and worse cartilage and a terrible extracellular matrix. So you want to avoid this. How do you avoid it? Avoid fruit juice, avoid sugared sodas, don't eat added sugar, try to avoid candy. Look at the ingredients on the food you're eating, make sure there's fiber in it. Look for those trick words for glucose, and just generally speaking, try to eat food that would have been available, let's say, even 20 years ago. Right? We used to cook all our own food. Nobody went to the store and had a prefab meal that was made in a factory 100 miles away and shipped there frozen overnight. Right? That's what we're doing to ourselves nowadays. What about air fryers? Oh yeah, no air fryers. So air fryers is another trick that they've foisted upon you to make you think that things are healthy. A dry, high heat environment forms advanced glycation products much more rapidly than a moist, low heat environment. So if you boiled a piece of meat versus put it in the air fryer, you're actually going to be better off with the boiled piece because it's going to have far fewer advanced glycation end products. We had a question of how do I take NMN, what time of day and with or without food. I take 1,000 milligrams, which is 2 of the capsules in the morning with something fatty. Like now I put heavy cream in my coffee because it's no glucose or sugar, but I time restrict eat as well. And we can talk about that in another talk if you want. You can take it with yogurt or egg. It just absorbs easier with something fatty, just like turmeric does. Okay. Next, sorry about the background noise. Question is diabetes reversible or does it just go into remission? Well, a permanent remission to me would be reversible. I have seen people reverse their diabetes, okay? And as long as they continue to maintain a healthy lifestyle, it's not going to come back. But of course, it'll come back if you go right back to your old ways. So I guess it can go either way, but yes, as long as you're controlling the sugar and your body has a chance to heal itself, you can reverse these things. Now, are there some people where they're so far gone, it's not reversible at that point? I don't know. I can't speak to that. I personally, in my medical practice, have seen a lot of people when they have bariatric surgery, when they get on the right meds, when they actually make mindset changes and change the way they think about food and get what I call a health mindset about food, they do stop needing any medications. All right, so here we go. Is it arthritis? Is it age? Is it arthritis and age? Is it just a metabolic syndrome? What is going on here? We know that osteoarthritis appears somewhere around the age of 65, sooner and sooner nowadays. If you have metabolic syndrome, it seems to show up at the age of 50. Okay, remember I told you 90 to 93% of Americans have metabolic syndrome. So that means every American, except for 7%, is going to have some kind of a musculoskeletal complaint by the age of 50. Okay, 30% of the global population has this problem. Metabolic syndrome is in 30% of the global population, okay? If you take just the people with arthritis out of the global population, metabolic syndrome is in 70% of them. So they are very tightly correlated. And I just told you the ways that it might be causal, okay? If you have diabetes, you are at a 300% chance of getting a total knee arthroplasty versus not having diabetes, a 3x chance of that, just because of hyperglycemia, sorbitol, the polyol pathway, all the side effects of excessive amounts of energy that your body is overwhelmed with. So is it causal? Is it correlated? I don't know, but all I know is the literature is clear that people that live a healthy lifestyle and eat healthy foods that are actually from the planet Earth, a part of our carbon cycle, seem to do a lot better than the people that are unhealthy and eating just factory foods and doing things to forcefully damage their body, like drinking straight fructose and sugar. So 55% of those with arthritis also happen to have hypertension. Less nitric oxide, likely from too much uric acid, which downregulates your nitric oxide, which is, what opens up your blood vessels. Less blood to the cartilage results. So osteoarthritis is linked not just to metabolic syndrome, but also to hypertension. And remember, hypertension is one of the criteria of metabolic syndrome. And then obesity produces inflammation, inflammatory adipokines such as leptin. Leptin levels in cartilage has been shown to be very increased in people with arthritis. There's increases in matrix metalloproteinase, number 3, 9, and 13. These are the little enzymes that destroy and degrade protein, induced by inflammation. Okay, in this SWAN study, they followed women for about a decade, 10 years, and they found that the people that had knee arthritis, generally speaking, always had a higher leptin level when they tested them. And nobody's finding adiponectin, which is the anti-inflammatory cytokine made. They're not finding that in healthy cartilage, but they are finding it in osteoarthritis. So it's sort of like a defense mechanism, I guess you could think of it. There's also increased prostaglandins. And again, we already talked about the MMP production. So nowadays, big pharmaceutical companies are looking hard for anti-MMP products, anti-leptin, anti-prostaglandin, this and that. They want a single molecule blockbuster drug answer, just like semaglutide seems to be, right? When really all of this is in your control, in your power, and your whole life would be better if you were healthier, not just your joints. But definitely your joints would stop looking like the one on the right and more like the one on the left. So we know the glucose makes the extracellular matrix dysfunctional and stiff. There's less klotho, which is this longevity protein that helps the cartilage repair and regenerate. The worse off your extracellular matrix and the worse off the mitochondria and your chondrocytes are, the fewer of these klothos you have, the less ability to repair and regenerate. We know it destroys subchondral bone. We know there's dysfunctional chondrocytes. We've already talked about how there's a more of an acidic environment because the metabolism goes that way where more acid is produced. And then that acid in turn leads to a stiffer extracellular matrix, which leads to worse off mitochondria. And we know there's less energy given to your chondrocytes and given to your repair functions. So there is no rest, restoration, and repair. So the plant can never be maintained, okay? The janitors can never come in at night and clean it up. It's just not possible if you keep having excessive levels of glucose in your system. All right. So this is just more of the same, talking about how chronic inflammation increases levels of oxidized low-density lipoprotein. Remember, LDL in and of itself, if it's big and fluffy and not oxidized, is not terrible. It's the smaller particles that fructose preferentially goes into, the VLDLs, that are really bad, and oxidized LDL. So you'll get uptake of LDL by the synovial macrophages, and then that in turn will also induce the formation of spurs. So you just don't want as many oxidized LDLs, which of course is a product of excess energy and too much glucose in the system. All right, so somebody asked about sugar alternatives. So why can't we just replace sugar with sugar alternatives? Well, let's talk about that, because I think that there's not really a true consensus here. More and more is being studied and learned about. There's just so much that goes into health and wellness and metabolism. It's really hard to do single molecule studies in the nutrition world. Just know that up front. There's no consensus right now. The trend in the wellness world, from what I hear and read, is a lot of the people that are prominent in that world seem to be against sugar alternatives, a hard no on it. My opinion is obesity is definitely really bad for you, and so is diabetes. The fake sugars, some of them are bad for you, some of them we're pretty sure aren't. So I would go with the lesser of two evils personally, if it were me, if I couldn't just go without any of it, which is ideally what you would want to do. But in general, there's no consensus. Some people say one sugar Coke is equal to 2 Diet Cokes, so it's half as bad. But that's sort of just like kind of an arbitrary rule of thumb, I would suppose. Some people say there is gut biome damage, and I'm going to tell you why, just because of the way the sugar passes through your gut and how it's metabolized. Some people believe it still spikes glucose. Now, I can tell you I wore a glucose monitor personally for a month to see what happened to me with different things I did. And anytime I drank a Diet Coke or put Splenda in iced tea, I never had a glucose spike. So maybe that's true for population, but for me individually, that was not true. And I'm going to tell you about a study where that was also not true. So I'm not sure about that. And then if you don't have a glucose spike, do you ever have an insulin response? Probably not. But again, all of this is still being studied. So I'm just going to give you what I've learned, and you guys have to make a decision for yourself. So the sugar substitutes, there's a bunch of them. Here's the ones you may or may not have heard of: neotame, saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, advantame, acesulfame, stevia, monk fruit, erythritol, okay? Most of these are made in a lab these days. Sugar alcohols are probably the more common one. How this works is an alcohol, I'll go into the molecular thing a little bit later. Basically, they're not absorbed during digestion. Okay, when you eat glucose, remember I told you in the bacteria, there's some bacteria that love simple carbs and they'll just eat them right up. That's one way to get the sugar gone. A lot of it will get absorbed by glucose receptors in the intestine. But if you've got a sugar alcohol, that molecule is not recognized the same way and it's not absorbed. It is still considered a carbohydrate. It's still an energy source, but it has a lower glycemic index, meaning it's not going to spike the glucose and spike the insulin. There's fewer calories. Why? Because it's far sweeter. So the taste of these things is exponentially higher, so you don't need nearly as much to make the same drink the same level of sweetness, okay? Some people that have to follow what's called a FODMAP diet will have trouble with sugar alcohols because their gut will just blow up with this because of the way it's handled by the gut bacteria. A FODMAP is fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So those are the complex and non-complex sugars that get fermented in your gut, okay? Wait, go back. This chart is showing you the glycemic index of sugar alcohols versus sugars. Erythritol has no blood glucose spike. Glucose has the most because that is the standard for what causes a blood glucose spike. Okay. All right. So a sugar alcohol is a saccharide derivative of a glucose or a sugar obtained by replacing the aldehyde group on glucose with a hydroxyl group. So the difference between the glucose and the fructose molecule is not just the ring structure, 6 carbon versus 5 carbon, but where the functional group on the molecule is. And on glucose, the functional group is a hydroxyl group. On fructose, it's a ketone group. An aldehyde group on glucose. The aldehyde group gets replaced by a hydroxyl, and that's a sugar alcohol. Just making that single molecular change in the 6 carbon ring changes how your body metabolizes it 100%. So they work by limiting absorption. If it makes it to the distal intestine, the far intestine, it can be fermented. This is why it's not good for the FODMAP people. And you'll produce more methane, more carbon dioxide, more hydrogen, more flatulence, more bloating, more pain, right? So in some people, they don't digest sugar alcohols well, and they get gut problems from it. So do fake sugars cause gut problems? Sure, particularly in some people that have trouble with these particular kinds of sugars, the way they get fermented in the gut. There is a rapid production of energy from these things, just far less because you don't need as much to make the same sweetness level. Not a lot of research on the metabolic effects in the mitochondria, so I don't really have an answer for you there. All right, so saccharin, aspartame, sucralose. Sucralose is derived from sugar. Okay, this graph is showing you rates of obesity over time. This is what we're trying to fight with the artificial sugars. At least they're trying, right? I still drink Diet Coke every now and then, and I'm going to tell you why I'm okay with it. Probably should I cut it out completely? Of course. We should all be on a perfect Mediterranean diet. But one of the primary ways to have a nice long life is not to be overly stressed. So, you know, do what you can that's healthy for yourself. Don't beat yourself up, because guess what? Over time, as you get healthier, you're going to make even more healthier changes, more healthier changes, more healthier changes, with the ultimate goal being perfection, but nobody starts out perfect. All right, next slide. Sucralose is Splenda, okay? There is no aftertaste with Splenda, and that is its primary differentiator from all the other sugar alternatives or non-nutritive sweeteners or fake sugars. In this case, you have a selective substitution of a chlorine for the hydroxyl group on the sucrose core, okay? So just a little one molecule, little configuration. That makes it unrecognizable by the body, and you essentially poop it out. So your Splenda, you put in your iced tea and you drink it, it's going all the way through the gut into the toilet and never gets absorbed or used as an energy form. It was approved by the FDA in 1998, and it's been shown to be safe for long-term use. It's even safe, per the studies done so far, for pregnant and nursing mothers. Now, would I recommend it to anybody pregnant or nursing? Of course not. But the FDA has said that. It is 600 times sweeter than sugar. And the FDA has actually allowed a marketing statement or a claim to be made that it reduces cavities, because it does. If you give a kid candy sweetened with Splenda, they're not going to have nearly the level of cavities that somebody that's eating candy with sugar. Next. Okay, so again, they say it's safe for children. Would I want to give it to my children all the time? No. But the FDA and the International Food Information Council Foundation in 2010 said it was safe. I will say Splenda has been studied to death. It is heavily studied, and really they haven't found a ton wrong with it. There is a rat study that showed there was a decrease in some of the good gut bacteria and a little bit of weight gain, but that study, which was used to poo-poo Splenda for a very long time, has been heavily criticized, and a lot of other authors have had issue with the methodology, shall we say. We know that when you eat sucralose, there is no increase in the incretin hormones, so the GLP-1s or the semaglutide that the gut normally produces, that is not made. No excess insulin is made. There's no slowing of gastric emptying when you take insulin. I'm sorry, not take insulin, when you take sucralose. So you can maintain steady glucose homeostasis when you're eating Splenda. Remember I told you I tested myself for a month, and I found that to be true. I never, ever had a glucose spike when I had Splenda. And then it can inhibit the gut biome, the gut barrier function, and mess with your digestive enzymes. And in some people, it is a trigger for migraines. So beware of that. If you're prone to migraines, you may want to avoid Splenda. Now, sometimes you can get a little bit of, I guess, bloating from these things. And now you know why, because they're not digested. If they are digested, it's by bacteria that ferment it and make gas. But that's how they can be calorie-free, because you never actually absorb them. However, the molecular structure is such that it tastes sweet. Next. Somebody's asking a question about a particular brand of low-calorie sodas, Coke Zero and Sunkist Zero. I don't know offhand what they use. I know Diet Coke uses aspartame and phenylalanine. Coke Zero, I'm not sure how different that is. Next. Next slide. Okay. Somebody asked a question about how much sugar daily is optimal. I would say added sugar 0. if you're eating whole, healthy foods, whatever sugar is found in 9 servings of fruits and vegetables, 4 to 5 servings of whole grains, and then some proteins with that and healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil, that is the recommended amount of sugar. If it's added or made in a factory and put into some ultra-processed food, the answer is probably 0 technically. But again, we live in America. It's almost impossible to do that. Really just have to do the best you can. The first non-nutritive sweetener, or NNS, that was approved by the FDA was cyclamate, and that was actually retracted because it turned out to cause cancer. This one is bad. It is carcinogenic, but you probably may or may not know, but the FDA retracts, I think it's like 5% every year of the drugs they approve. So that is not unusual that they approve something and then find out later, oh, by the way, this causes cancer. But I'll tell you, the Splenda, like I told you before, that's been studied for years and years and years and years, and no one's found that yet. Saccharin got a bad name. Saccharin was in TAB, if y'all remember. Saccharin got a bad name before, again, from a rat study. But what they found, the amount of TAB you would have to drink to get the cancer that they caused in lab rats, you basically have to drink 800 cans of TAB a day to get the same amount of saccharin that they fed to the lab animals when they were testing them in a preclinical study for cancer. So you can safely consume about 8.5 packets of saccharin for life and not get cancer, per the current studies. I'll tell you, in India, this particular non-nutritive sweetener is very prevalent and in almost everything. The average daily intake there is much higher than it is here and much higher than what is recommended by our governing bodies here, because it's so common there. It was delisted as a carcinogen in the year 2000 here, just so you know. So the study that gave saccharin a bad name was a bad study in general. Am I promoting or advocating non-nutritive sweeteners? No, of course not. But am I saying you should not have sugar and fructose? Yes. So equal, which is aspartame, which is what is in Diet Coke, I'm pretty sure. Amino acid. So they take amino acids, aspartic acid and phenylalanine, and combine them in such a way that the molecular structure is 200 times sweeter than sucrose. It doesn't elicit nearly the same brain, that should be brain or pancreas response, as does sugar. So it doesn't give you that same dopamine spike in the brain, and it doesn't give the same insulin pump that in the pancreas. I'm just going to throw this out there. All industry-sponsored studies say it's perfectly fine, no problem here. 92% of independent studies show some type of adverse event. Claims of side effects, for instance, adverse events, headaches, Alzheimer's, ADHD, birth defects, diabetes, Gulf War syndrome, lupus. A lot of these are very vague things that, is it the equal or was it the chemicals in the Gulf War? I don't know. I'm just telling you that the jury's out on aspartame. It's been used for years and years and years here, but the studies aren't as strong as the ones on Splenda. So acetyl, I don't even know how to say it, acesulfame K, or Sunette, Sweet One, or Swiss Sweet. This was discovered by a Swiss company in 1967, and they combined an organic acid with potassium. It was approved in Europe well before it was approved here. The breakdown product of this non-nutritive sweetener is highly toxic, but the levels that are eaten, or the average daily intake of this particular molecule, are so low that you would never form enough of that toxic metabolite to do anything bad to yourself. But when they studied this particular product, it was before they standardized the assays for lab animals that would say if something was carcinogenic or not. So it was studied, but it wasn't really studied. So again, no real consensus here, jury's out. So again, do they increase glucose or cause an insulin spike? A lot of authors and people believe that it does. This has been studied. There was a preclinical, which means lab animal study, that compared sucralose, which is against Splenda, against sucrose, water, and sucrose with sucralose. They found no difference in the levels of triglycerides or glucagon, which is another gut hormone. But they did find a difference in the groups when they compared the groups with and without sugar, real sugar, for the presence of insulin, ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, and glucose. And that was regardless of the presence of sucralose. So the difference was really just sugar. So if you don't have sugar, you're not going to spike insulin or glucose, and you will still be able to feel hungry. Sucralose did not spike glucose in this study. And then again, saccharin is not metabolized in the gut, so there's no spike there either. Do you eat more when you take fake sugar? This is another thing we hear a lot. Well, the preclinical data would suggest that yes, with saccharin. So that's the pink packet, I guess. Saccharin has been shown to cause lab animals to end up eating more, even though they have the sweetness, the same sweetness. They'll end up eating more of the food versus the ones that are eating the real sugar. But in general, the answer to this question is no. There's no conclusive evidence that non-nutritive sweeteners cause weight gain of children. Because again, globally, a lot of kids are eating this stuff in large amounts. There's no evidence it causes weight gain in adults. Conversely, there's no evidence it helps you lose weight. So again, jury's out. Caveat emptor is what I say, let the buyer beware. Just know that some of these were studied more than others. In general, they don't spike your glucose. In general, they do cause some bloating and some gut issues, may or may not lead directly to leaky gut. A lot of authors believe that is entirely true. If you can get away with not drinking these at all, this would be great, or adding them to your foods. But I'll tell you, it's in a lot of food in the grocery store. You almost can't get away from it. Sorbitol is the one I would watch out for the most, and that's what we're going to talk about coming up here. So stevia, tagatose, monk fruit, these are the natural fake sugars. 100 to 300 times sweeter than sugar is stevia. Very bitter, bad aftertaste for me personally, I think. It tastes like menthol to some people. Again, it is not absorbed in the gut. The glucose is broken off. The steviol molecule that was attached to the glucose is absorbed and excreted after the liver metabolizes it. Tagatose browns really well, so it's added to a lot of foods to give it that brown look or that seared look. It's great for baking, that crusty kind of look around a nice loaf of bread or whatever. And then monk fruit, which I personally also think has an aftertaste. But I encourage you, if you cannot get away from sugar and you have to have that sweet taste, this is maybe a good step down to getting to a really healthy diet versus trying to go cold turkey and having, total stress out. All right, sorbitol, remember I talked about that? Fructose, enemies. So sorbitol will become fructose in the right setting with the right enzyme. That's the polyol pathway to process excessive amounts of glucose in your bloodstream. This is the endogenous or innate production of fructose. When there's so much glucose, the body doesn't know what to do with it, so it converts it to sorbitol using allulose reductase. So that's AR. So that enzyme converts glucose to sorbitol, then sorbitol dehydrogenase converts to fructose, and we know fructose goes straight to the bad fat, and also to advanced glycation end products, and also to uric acid and gout. So other things that stimulate this particular enzyme besides high levels of glucose is anything hypertonic, so any osmolar or increase in the concentration in your blood, hyperglycemia, and then hypoxia or less oxygen. Sorbitol is a sugar alcohol. It is added to a lot of foods. So if you see sorbitol on the ingredients, maybe avoid it because you know your body's going to switch that straight to fructose. So the polyol pathway we just talked about that's triggered by sugar. Remember I told you that the one enzyme, sorbitol dehydrogenase, is not present in certain tissues. So then in those cases, the sorbitol is just going to damage stuff in and of itself. The tissues where the fructose forms, or when you're eating excessive fructose, remember I told you fructose forms advanced glycation end products about 200 to 250 times faster than sugar does. That's when you get the browning of your connective tissues. And this is showing the browning of a lens over time, just from excessive amounts of advanced glycation end products. That's your so-called cataracts, right? All right, so what if you have too much fructose and too much sorbitol? Well, there are known conditions with this where people can't metabolize fructose and sorbitol, even in the gut. That's when you get the gas, the bloating, the abdominal pain, diarrhea, a leaky gut, etc. I'm just telling you this because sorbitol is added to so many products out in the grocery store to make them sweeter. And fructose is added to, let's face it, almost everything. So you can't just avoid fructose, you guys also avoid sorbitol. And then if you're going to have a non-nutritive sweetener, maybe pick the ones that have been studied the most, or at least understand the risks. And if you accept those risks, then that's fine. In a perfect world, we would all just drink water, right? And eat fresh, wild-caught fish with no pollution. But we live in a world filled with pollution and stress and oxidative stress, and we just got to do what we can.
What are your thoughts on pure protein, like protein bars, shakes, protein drinks?
Good question. What are my thoughts on protein bars, protein shakes, and what? Oh, protein drinks. My opinion, Those are all still made in a factory and ultra processed. So they all still go through a deconstructed process where the different ingredients are formed. Then they're put together in a high heat environment using emulsifiers and different chemicals. Then they're put in a plastic package. Then they're shipped to you with, God knows how much fuel and stored. So they're still ultra processed. Is a protein bar better than a Snickers bar? I'm actually not sure anymore. Because when I look at some protein bars and I look at a Snickers bar, the macronutrient levels are almost identical. Do that one day as an exercise and try to find a protein bar that's better than a Snickers bar, or you can make your own. So that is the workaround. So if you really want protein bars or you really want protein smoothies, I would make your own at home so that you don't have to worry about added emulsifiers, added stabilizers to make the shelf life longer, added coloring, things like that. So if you make your own protein bar with whole grains and things like that at home, I think that's probably fine. But honestly, I would get my protein from edamame or a steak, not a ribeye, but a filet, and not cooked on high, dry heat and not eaten that often. I'm a big proponent of the Mediterranean diet, you may or may not know. And that is just trying to eat as many whole and minimally processed foods as possible. Oh, and yeah, if I eat a steak, it is a grass-fed steak. Definitely not corn-fed. Okay, so what should you do? So you've got to find a way to cut out excess sugar. Now, do I want people to sit and keep a food journal and get hypervigilant and increase their stress levels and cause oxidative stress in their brain worrying about this stuff? No. But the simple things, don't drink juice, avoid full sugar soda, try not to add sweeteners to your coffee and tea, things like that. Then you can advance to things like when you go to the grocery store, try to buy the food that doesn't have excessive amounts of added sugar. Then you can advance to getting the carbohydrate fiber ratio right. And in an ideal world, you can get to the point where you just make your own food. Engage in time-restricted eating. I think this is probably the simplest way to manage your excess glucose, excess anything, is shorten your eating window every day. The average eating window in America is 15 to 16 hours a day. So people are eating that many hours a day, nonstop. So if you can compress that to ideally a 10 or 8 hour window, you'll be doing a world of favors for yourself, because by definition, you're just not going to have time to intake that much. Exercise, not just to lose weight. Exercise won't make you lose weight. We talked about Snickers bar. Eating a half a Snickers bar, you could run for 2 hours. You're net at the same level. What exercise does, though, is it pulls glucose out of the blood into your muscle, and it helps you keep muscle and make muscle. So exercise for brain health and muscle health and bone health, and to help your insulin sensitivity, but don't think that exercise in and of itself will help you lose weight. Don't drink juice. We talked about that. And then I would supplement personally. Oh, this was what was on the slide. Can you go back, just real quick, go back to my slide? Okay, I would supplement with omega-3s because that helps the gut be healthy. It gives you building blocks for things like serotonin and whatnot, and it also makes your cell membranes more fluid healthier, which does what for your connective tissue? Makes you feel more flexible. It helps the flexibility overall. I tell all my patients to get on 2 to 4 grams of omega-3s if they really want to reduce inflammation in their joints and they really want their joints to be more flexible. CoQ10 is one of the mandatory transporters in the electron transport chain, and it's a very powerful antioxidant. A lot of the statin drugs you're on now deplete your natural levels of CoQ10. Not that we have them at a high enough level anyway. So I supplement with CoQ10 and tell all my patients with muscle soreness and aches and pains to do that. Tart cherry extract pulls urate out, so it helps reduce the risk of gout and uric acid deposition, and it's a massively powerful antioxidant, and it is great for pain. It's been studied in a lot of runners and things for muscle pain. Turmeric, also very, very good anti-inflammatory, good for the gut, good for the brain. You can't take it when you're on warfarin because it uses the same liver processing enzyme. CBD, which is the non-psychoactive component of the hemp plant, also massively antioxidant, attaches to receptors in your immune system and helps clean up trash in the body and helps you get into that repair and restore phase. It helps to upregulate what's called the endocannabinoid system, which is the regulating system of the body. Resveratrol has been studied in arthritis and been found to make any given arthritis drug work better, like Mobic, for instance, and is great for arthritic pain in and of itself. It is also one of the longevity molecules and will help with the DNA repair that your cartilage needs to do overnight while you're fasted and sleeping. NMN, we already talked about, and berberine, we talked about. All of these things are going to help keep your glucose levels stable, help your body use the glucose better, and reduce the inflammation that's mucking with your mitochondria. So those are the simple things you can do, sort of a stepwise kind of a pattern to try to make your body feel better. Because the same stuff that's causing heart attacks and cancer, brain degenerative diseases, you name it, is the same reason you feel old. I don't think that any of us ever have to say, oh, my knees are starting to hurt because I'm 50. That just makes no sense on any molecular level. We're doing it to ourselves. We can reverse it. So here are the supplements I talked about. So again, the berberine with meals, 30 minutes or so before, NMN in the morning. Tart cherry, I take at night. There's a natural level of melatonin in there. Remember, melatonin you want at night to trigger all of those rest, restoration, repair things that happen at night. You have to have melatonin at night. You don't want it during the day. That'll just mess up all the clock genes in your body. Turmeric, our turmeric also has ginger, also been shown to really help with the inflammation of arthritis. And it has PEA, which is another component of the endocannabinoid system. Much like CBD upregulates the endocannabinoid system, PEA does too. It's palmitoyl ethanolamide. That is a wonderful natural molecule you make every day in an ongoing fashion, probably just not enough to fight the stress of modern life. So the Joint Health Multi has all of that, turmeric, PEA, and ginger, along with black pepper. And then omega-3, which I think is mandatory, unless you're really eating wild-caught fatty fish every day, which very few of us are doing, to get the right levels of omega-3 relative to omega-6 with the modern American diet. I personally have to supplement. There's no way I could do it otherwise. And I find that most of my patients are very low in omega-3s as well, very high in omega-6. So to get that ratio right, to reduce inflammation and increase flexibility, you have to add omega-3s. And then the CoQ10 we talked about is an electron transporter for the electron transport chain, and also one of the more powerful antioxidants in your body. But if you're out there and you are in that group drinking fruit juice still, I would try to cut that out first. That's the baby step you could make. Just do it for a month or two. Don't make any other changes or any other moves. Once that becomes a habit and a normal way of being, then you make the next step. There's no reason to try to be a hero overnight. I mean, I think anything you do is helpful. We have a question.
What can we do to make a difference in our mitochondria?
Wow, that was a big question. What can we do to make a difference in our mitochondria? Well, I kind of just went through a lot of it. Don't overwhelm your mitochondria with too much input, so you can't give it excessive amounts of energy to process, number one. Number two, you have to give it a fasted time frame every day to repair itself. Number three, you have to give it a sleeping time every day to repair itself and detoxify. And then you've got to give the right micronutrients so the mitochondria works well. D3, omega-3, all the antioxidants and the phytochemicals found where? In the Mediterranean diet or here in supplements. I try to eat the Mediterranean diet as often as I can, but again, I'm not perfect, so I supplement on top of that. Maintain a steady blood glucose to keep your mitochondria from being overwhelmed. And I guess that's really it. And don't take exogenous toxins, like don't smoke, things like that, simple things. If you live in a state like mine, surrounded by chemical plants, and you know you're being attacked by chemicals all the time, all you can do is take a whole bunch of antioxidants, get a good night's sleep, and try to fight back the way you can, which limiting excess sugar and fructose is one of the easiest things you can do for yourself and your mitochondria. All right. Any last questions? And just to know, look, I still eat sugar. I'll still have a chocolate chip cookie every now and then, this and that, but never in excess, okay? And I'm doing as much as I can otherwise to help my system fight whatever damage might have happened from that. Again, I'm a big believer in the human condition, in the earth, and the ability to heal ourselves. That is why I'm in this natural medicine game, to I just want to assist your body in making yourself better. So I'm pretty sure what we, the industry, are doing is not working so well for you. I think we need to get a little bit closer to nature and a little bit back to common sense, really. And hopefully we're helping you do that. We have another question.
Please detail the benefits of berberine
Another question about berberine. So berberine is formed from a bark of a particular plant, and it mimics the activity of metformin. Metformin comes from, I believe, the French lilac or goat's rue. And what it does is it helps you manage your blood glucose because it helps the cellular efficiency of using glucose as it enters the TCA cycle or the Krebs cycle and as it goes into the electron transport chain. How it does is there's some debate, but most people believe it upregulates this particular molecule called AMPK, adenosine monophosphokinase, something like that. I can't remember the pronunciation off the top of my head, but AMPK is an energy sensing molecule. It is a longevity molecule. What happens is as your energy gets depleted, AMPK gets kicked in, things become more efficient, and you make better use, the mitochondria makes better use of fuel, okay? So berberine does the same thing as metformin with that regard. It essentially just helps you not spike insulin as much, I suppose, because it allows the cells to use glucose in a better way so there's not excessive amounts floating around, if that makes any sense. And also, when you upregulate AMPK and make every cell work better, you're also making the pancreas beta cells work better. So when they do feel the need to produce insulin, they do it in a better way. But clinically, berberine is shown to work as well as metformin in regulating blood glucose. Metformin, a lot of people take that have diabetes. A lot of people in the anti-aging world are taking it, but you have to have a prescription to take metformin still. Berberine you can take over the counter. As I always say to anybody, check with your doctor before you do that, of course, and just be careful. Make sure you know how it makes you feel and how you respond to it personally. Sorry. What do I think about omega-3 sourced from algae? I think that's great. That's where it comes from to begin with. The only reason fish have omega-3 is because the tiny fish eat the algae. So if you can get it sourced from algae, have at it. I mean, that's great. But as long as it's broken down into DHA and the EPA, because your body can't really successfully use ALA, that's a different source, flax and whatnot. But when you get it from fish, you just need to make sure it's tested for heavy metals and pesticides because the ocean's so polluted now. Ours is made from fish that are tested and are generally from the Scandinavian region of the world. And so there's no heavy metals or pesticides and whatnot. This is one of my problems with trying to eat seafood to get your omega-3, because unless you're catching wild-caught salmon or herring or whatever, and you know it's wild-caught and you know it's from a non-polluted body of water, you're still probably getting a lot of heavy metals every time you eat it, which I don't know if I would trade omega-3s for heavy metals. I would like to have more omega-3s and fewer heavy metals. That's why I supplement. I do see patients, and we are pretty busy, but we definitely see patients, yes, at Warner Orthopedics and Wellness. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. Debbie, too. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Hopefully this helped you. I know it was a lot of molecular stuff. You know, each section of the electron transport chain probably deserves its own talk. It's so fascinating. But just understand that we are part of a very huge cycle of carbon, energy, water, oxygen, okay? And you just want to be a part of that cycle in as natural a way as you can be, with as few chemical additives and added sugar. So whole foods is how we were meant to be. We were not meant to eat deconstructed fake factory food with added sugar. Just kind of keep that in mind and get that health mindset. Everything that you think that you want to buy or eat, start thinking of it that way. And I bet you'll find change happens without even trying. That was Rose. Rose just commented and said thank you, and she also says she's using the Healing Soul, which is a shoe I designed to help your body naturally heal foot pain. Thank you, Rose. And she's getting back to the Mediterranean diet. I love the Mediterranean diet. You'll hear people that love all kind of other different diets, but I think it's the most studied. It's the most like what humans should be doing, which we're social creatures. We really should be cooking together. The number one determinant of a very long, healthy life is the number of good, solid relationships you have. Nothing else matters, it seems. And the Mediterranean diet gives you that, because part of it is cooking with friends and family at home with natural foods. And that in and of itself becomes a very fun thing to do. I know my friends and I and our family, we're always sharing recipes and cooking for each other and talking about, oh, I found this healthy ingredient or this one. Oh, look at this extra virgin olive oil I found, et cetera, et cetera. And it's fun and it's healthy. Much healthier than sitting and eating a bag of potato chips on the couch for a 4-hour football game. Although you can do that. Maybe just eat the healthy stuff during the 4-hour football game. Sharon and Lee say thank you. Thank you for watching. All right, guys, go enjoy your day. Get out there in the sunlight. It's good for you.